I was recently lucky enough to be given a compositional assignment by none other than Brian Eno. And when Brian Eno asks you to write a song, you say, "How quietly." So I and a great many other people were in an online masterclass with Brian Eno through the School of Song. It was an amazing experience with lectures and song shares, and Brian Eno himself giving you writing assignments, three of them actually. So for the second assignment, Brian Eno suggested we start with a escape, and by that he meant you go outside your normal environment with a notebook and find a place and sit for about 15 or 20 minutes and record your impressions. What you see, what you hear, what you feel and think and remember. So I dutifully reported to the cafe in the local Barnes and Nobles with this notebook and wrote down a lot of impressions. Some of the things that I wrote down were overhearing people say, I'm going to miss you. I love it when I trip on an idea, then stop stopping. I saw another woman who had like a canvas bag with a Latin inscription on it, which read, "This pain will benefit you once," which I take it is from sort of a dark academia series, but I wasn't sure. But the longer I sat there, the more my thoughts traveled to other times and other places. It's no slight to Barnes and Nobles. I like Barnes and Nobles, but it's a big chain store, and as such, not terribly an inspiring environment. But here was how my thought train progressed. I wrote it down. I remembered the disappearing Barnes and Nobles and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I remembered the Coop in my freshman year and buying cassette tapes and some specific ones. The fluorescent lights remind me of working at a hospital one summer and led me to remember certain magazines I was reading at the time. And then I also was remembering collecting a series of vintage contemporary books when I was in college and Harvard Square and going to a particular place called the Café Pamplona. So the longer I sat there, the more I kind of realized that the Café Pamplona is almost the antithesis of Barnes and Nobles. One is sort of one of a chain. You could go in one in any state in the United States and pretty much get the same thing. And the Café Pamplona was this very iconoclastic, tiny, sort of a one-of-a-kind place. And so as I kept thinking about the place, I started to think that is more interesting than anything that I'm sort of experiencing here. I don't want to say that the experiment that Brian Eno set up wasn't useful. It was extremely useful. I could have made a very nice piece of music out of all the intel that I was gathering there in this notebook. But the more I thought about it, the more my mind kept going back to my college days, Café Pamplona, collecting this series of books, starting to drink coffee for the first time, being very intellectually aware. And so the basis of a song was forming. So having decided that I'm going to set my piece in the past, and in this Café Pamplona that I knew so well, a couple of other things came to mind. And one of those things is psychogeography. Loosely defined, it's that, certain places will have associations. If you're into kind of supernatural things, you might even think that, events of the past will actually color a place or remain there. And so two things immediately happened. I was thinking about this actual place that I spent some very formative years in and all of the things that were associated with that. But I was also thinking about a project that I had on the books, which has not yet come to fruition, which I was calling A Heart in Winter. That was based on psychogeography. And what I did was to take a portable recorder and go around to many places in Massachusetts, some in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where I'm from, some in Cambridge, where I went to school, and record some audio of these places where certain things, good and bad, had happened to me. And the idea would be that someday I was going to make an album utilizing these sounds as well as music. So as I'm thinking about the Café Pamplona, I remembered that in my sound collecting journey, I had actually recorded a bunch of ambient sound one day sitting there in Pamplona with a coffee and some apple cake. Okay, so I've got this thought now that like I'm going to be setting this piece in the past in Pamplona in a very specific time of life. And I've also got this sound that I can use that is actually from the cafe. That made me think of a very particular Depeche Mode song, which also is kind of a piano ballad, which uses the ambient sound of a cafe and some sound effects behind what is mostly just a piano, beautiful piano ballad that I had the good fortune to perform when I was in school with a person that was a great, great singer. Um, so now I'm thinking along the lines of this Depeche Mode song. I've got the sounds I found from the cafe, and I'm evoking a kind of a time and a place, and that is my college years. And I put the idea of psychogeography towards the supernatural. And that being said, that like these places which have a charge in the memory, some people would think a charge that you could actually feel, that places have a memory. I kind of went and pushed it further into the supernatural and thought about, well, what ghosts are in the walls of this place, Pamplona, which has been here for a very long time. So now I'm starting to come up with the idea of a ghost that is, like in this cafe writing, and from a time period that was wonderful but is past, and the ghost cannot move on. It's a serious thought, and it kind of gets told through the lens of a relationship, which makes sense, but it's also a relationship with a time and a place. So this ghost is longing for a time, maybe a simpler time with less complications, a younger time, a time in my life where, thoughts were starting to really coalesce around ideas. I felt very much alive in the mind at that time. Something as simple as these vintage contemporary books that I was collecting, really, just every one of them seemed to kind of light me up. Coffee, I mean, which sounds silly, but I hadn't really had coffee before this. And so that light your mind up, in a way too. There's a note in my observations as my mind started to wander off of Barnes and Nobles where I had, it says Ghosts of Chess Games, and that was a reference to the chess games that were out front of Albon Pan. I don't know if they're still there. Albon Pan is not. This is all in Harvard Square. So all of these thoughts coalesce into this idea that there is the ghost of this particular place, and he is caught in a particular time and cannot move forward. I'm going to play a few moments of the track that I wound up writing. There's one other thing that is worth mentioning, and that comes under the category of collaboration. When I wrote this track for the Eno class, it felt a little bit too short. I usually like to take a guitar solo, even though that's sort of, talk about ghosts, something that's probably of an earlier time and out of fashion, at least at this point in history. But I do play the guitar and I like to take guitar solos. Didn't take one in the original. There's sort of one on the ride out. But what I did do was contacted a cello player. I'm going to put his name on screen here because I don't want to mash it up. And he is a cello player for hire. I sent him the track, and I gave him free rein to respond. Very few notes about what I wanted. One and done. He did it. So I would hire him again. I'll put a link to his profile where you could hire him if you are interested in having a cello solo. But here is a few moments out of what I'm calling the Ghost of Pamplona. And after that, I will come back and just say a few closing words. And now it's me who's calling. An empty window
trust that you were the one. Time, take me back in time, that I might live again in magnificence. Mine, were you ever mine? A divided line of great significance. Down a table in society, you can still see him in moonlit glow. Ghost of Pamplona is writing. You can move on, you won't let go. No, I could have never known that the way it was shown was for one time alone.
So at this point, I always like to ask myself a couple questions. And the first one is, was the experiment I ran a success? And for the first time, I think I and Brian Eno would give me an F. And the reason for that is, Brian Eno had a very specific assignment, and I went off and kind of did it. And then at a certain point, I went off road. Like I said, I could have taken all those things I heard and saw, and maybe in another video, I'll go ahead and do that and make the piece that, Brian Eno sort of sent me on my way to make. But I would also say that Brian Eno being, Brian Eno, he would also understand that there is a point in a time where you're doing an experiment where you maybe get a better idea or at least a different idea. And that experiment, which I decided not to complete, leads to this one and to this song. And it also reminded me of another sort of, related story, which was he likes to set up these sort of persona roles, especially for musicians. There's a great set of roles he created, sort of like a 3x5 card that he handed out to the improvising musicians who are working on Bowie's Outside record. And they're very colorful and they really make you think. And, the idea is, that you're not you anymore. One of them was you're kind of like a guy who's in an off-world mining place. We play a certain kind of music. We take this particular drug. It makes you play this way. And you kind of try to inhabit that role. I will put a link to one of my earlier videos, which is also about the idea of taking on a persona or a role and resonating with it to try and get something out of yourself that you yourself alone might not do. So in this example, he had given a thing to Reeves Gabrels and, was trying to get him to continually play this solo only on one string. And it worked up until a point and built a tremendous amount of tension. And then at a certain point for release, Reeves went, off leash and totally forgot about the rules. But you wound up with a great solo because it provided a springboard up until a point. And when he could no longer, hold it and went full spaghetti, you got a really amazing solo. So you kind of set up a thing, but when it's time to leave it, you leave it if the results are good. Did I learn anything? I mean, probably yes. I could go on and on about, just the stuff that Brian Eno says in lectures and just, what a tremendous influence he is and what a thoughtful and very funny person he is. So that's something I already knew, but, I would say for creative people who aren't familiar with Brian Eno, I would definitely read his diary that he published for 1 year. It's called A Year with Swollen Appendices. It's incredible what he managed to pull off in a year, and I wish he would do it again, or maybe release some of his notebooks, because what glimpses I've seen into them are very, very interesting from a creativity perspective. The other thing that I learned is sort of about composite characters, because, like I said, I framed this song in the context of a relationship, and it is that, but it's a composite. What I mean by it's a relationship not necessarily just with a particular person, it's a relationship with a time and a place and kind of a mindset that at least the narrator looks back on being stuck and unable to return to a very particular time and place. And so it's about a relationship tangentially, but it's also about, a time and place in one's life. It's kind of this idea of sort of this glowing golden moment that, a lot of people will say, well, college, that's the time of your life. And in a way it is. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I'm sure everybody's got a different take on it. And like I said, mine has ups and downs, but it's one time in your life for 4 years. You're not really totally immersed in the responsibilities of adulthood. You're kind of on the cusp of it. But, if you're lucky, almost all your friends are just like a few doors away, or maybe you're even living in the same room with them. Your mind is still free to sort of travel to wherever it takes you, and mine was. I don't mean to suggest that all of this is lost, of course. In fact, I did a recent video on my notebooks where I was happy to rediscover that many of my concerns and subject matter that I found interesting and obsessions are very much the same now as they were when I was a younger man. I just mean to say that things are different when you're in your 20s versus, say, when you're in your 50s. The couple last things I did learn was in researching about the Pamplona when I was making the video. I found that it sadly has closed, and I was surprised to learn that the history of it goes back a good deal further than I had realized. I'll put the date down below, but I believe it was in the 50s. So if you can think about the number of people and friends who were in that room laughing and talking and possibly crying, the amount of memories in such a small space it's incalculable and incredible. And if you do believe that spaces hold charges or memories or possibly ghosts, then I'm certain that those walls contain a multitude of ghosts and memories. I also feel like I do lean on Brian Eno a little bit too heavily in this series. It makes sense. He's sort of like the unofficial godfather of massive creativity. And in this one, he certainly is actively present, and that he gave me and everyone else in this class this assignment. But I do feel like I should probably try not to lean as heavily on him as I do. And the very last thing I would say is about collaboration, which is, again, something I'm not super comfortable with, but I'm edging closer to. So in this particular song, I reached out to a person I've never met. They live half a world away, and basically gave them almost free reign to put their stamp on a piece of music of mine, which is kind of would have been inconceivable for me to do in the past. But I'm sort of gradually becoming more comfortable with the idea of taking my hand off the wheel so that I don't have to do absolutely every part of everything. And I do think it's to much greater effect. So I am going to try to keep moving towards that and bringing more people into the music, maybe in other roles as well. So thank you so much for listening to this about psychogeography. I hope you enjoyed the piece. Let me know what you think. If you've got places of interest or memory or that hold a charge, I'd be very interested to hear about that. And like and subscribe, please, helps the channel. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks so much.